Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. And everyone, hey, welcome into the program. Today on the show, it is Friday. We hope that you had a great week and you're ready to kind of head out of the office. And and we're going to head that out with, of course, Ralph Bond, the one, the only, longtime Computer America correspondent, and we will bring him on in just a moment. And he is, of course, our science and technology trends correspondent. So a lot of fun stories, and we'll get more into that in just a moment. But before we do, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future shows, are scheduled, the podcast. You can, of course, find social media links, articles, reviews, show notes is going to be a huge one for today's program. All that and more. Essentially, anything that we do with Computer America, computeramerica.com is obviously the best place to go, as well as a link to our guest website. Something I don't mention with a lot of our regular correspondents, I probably should start doing so, is that, of course, that if you head over to our YouTube, and there's different categories there or different playlists, and there's actually Ralph Bond. There's a Ralph Bond playlist going back, I think, by now about 2 years. And, of course, his website's going to be probably the much better alternative because you can see the show notes there next to the program. But, hey, also, if you just want a YouTube playlist of just, can't get enough Ralph, hey, that's, there you go. So speaking of can't get enough, why don't we go ahead and get started with today's program? So let's bring him on once again. And he's he was, of course, the voice of Intel Digital Minute. He's an author, a longtime Computer America correspondent, and hey, someone who's not melted, which is great. Ralph, welcome back onto Computer America. How you doing?
Hey, it's great to be back. Talk about not melted. Oh my Lord. The Northwest. Well, gosh, you heard probably the news how here in the Portland metro area, I'm in Hillsboro, which is about, 17 miles west of Portland, but our entire area experienced 117 degrees. And the day before, I think, was 115. And the day before that was like 113. We had about a three-day stretch of record-shattering epic temperatures for our part of the world where we're just not prepared for it. And tragically, I think the current count is about 106 or so people died because they were maybe elderly people that were in little homes that didn't have adequate air conditioning or something. And it's just terrible. So you don't believe in climate change? Come to Oregon, people. The glaciers of Mount Hood are melting. Our rivers are down very badly. We've had less than half the normal annual rain we would have by this time. You don't believe in climate change? Come to the Northwest, and we'll show you. There's my soapbox.
No, and honestly, I think that you're essentially preaching to the choir. I can't imagine too many Computer America listeners, let alone those who tune in for the Science and Tech Trends segment, would be against climate change. So I think that's not our particular aim for this. But I will say that my mother, when she was younger, used to live out in Seattle and places like that, and she said that they a lot of places don't even have AC because, it's just not really needed for that area.
That's
so,
right. That's
yeah, no air conditioning, 117 degrees. I grew up in Florida, and I, spent 20 plus years there, and I thought I knew heat, but I don't know 117 degrees heat. That's, that was definitely, hopefully something that's, just kind of a freak accident, but, or a freak occurrence. But hey, everyone, change is needed. So there you go.
Yes,
but hey, we're not here to kind of bring everyone down with science and tech and kind of figures and numbers. We're here to bring everyone up with science and tech and stuff like that. A lot of our stories, the first one's actually a pretty good example of what happens when we need to go somewhere else, because we've ruined Earth so bad. But Ralph, before we get started, why don't we go ahead and talk about what your goal is here with your segment here with your segment.
Yeah. Well, basically, what I try to do is I constantly monitor and troll a whole variety of technology and science and health science websites, and I kind of look for things that I go, wow, I've not heard this reported in any other mainstream media outlets, right? And so a lot of these stories, as you often say, Ben, sort of fly under our radar of consciousness. And so I like to cherry pick these stories. Sometimes they're profound, sometimes they're kind of goofy and wild, sometimes they're medical related and on and on. But I look for things that I hope the listeners will go, wow, I didn't know this was happening, or this is a big surprise, or I'm very encouraged by this advance in, say, medical science. So that's what I do each month, and pull it together and put the show notes together, as you pointed out. And listeners, please come out and get the show notes. It'll have the links, pictures, all this good stuff, because sometimes Ben and I aren't able to go through all of the 14 stories that I happen to have today. So you can always go to the show notes and pick up where we left off.
I don't think we've ever gotten through, maybe once with Craig.
I think once or twice.
Yeah. Once with Craig, like a number of years ago, we were able to get through all of them.
Yes.
But yeah, just because we don't get to them does not mean that they're not important or they're not fun. It's just, hey, we are an hour radio program. So
there it is.
Let's go ahead and spend our time productively and start with story number 1.
Yes, this is a great one. So the headline here is: new startup headed by NASA veterans wants to build a huge ring-shaped hotel to orbit the Earth. Gotta love this, right? And there were a variety of sources, but my primary sources were futurism.com. And then the other one was highconsumption.com, a very unusual name. But there's a variety of sources where you can pick up this story. There's a YouTube link in the show notes, all this good stuff. And then here we go. Here's the story. And by the way, this company was kind of launched early in January of this year. And then what we're talking about is their first milestone in realizing this dream. So here's the story. Orbital Assembly Corporation, a new startup company, recently announced a major step toward reaching their goal to build a ring-shaped luxury hotel in space. And you can see the image that Ben is showing you here on the screen. It's phenomenal. They now have developed a prototype robot that is capable of producing parts for the orbiting hotel to be assembled in space. This is very ambitious. The company, run by NASA veterans, as I mentioned a moment ago, has some very ambitious goals. It's looking to start construction in space as soon as 2023. Named the Voyager Space Station, it will be a massive circular luxury space hotel that spans 650 feet. And the Orbital Assembly Corporation team claims it will be the first habitable space station orbiting the Earth with artificial gravity. And you can dive deeper into this. It has to do with rotation, creating the gravitational effect. It's very interesting technology on its own right. But to go on here,
if you want to learn more about that, I recommend the great documentary Star Trek.
There you go.
Because I think they do that with oh my God, Ralph, what was the it was like the second or third movie of Star Trek.
Oh gosh.
I'll think of it. Go ahead. Yeah.
You'll catch it.
Yep.
So going on here, to construct the huge space station, the team plans to send, I love this, they want to send semi-autonomous robots to space to have them put the various parts together in orbit. Think of the choreography, if you will, of this. It's amazing. The station will be made up of a larger outer rim that's linked to modular pod units for guests, in addition to restaurants, theaters, shops, boutiques, and spas. The space station will also include a 400-guest hotel and luxury villas that will be available through short and long-term leasing programs and by using reusable rockets to facilitate travel to and from the station. The team hopes to make space tourism more affordable for the ultra super wealthy. So I guess a little more of the wealthy can go.
Yeah, well, and it's so weird. I'm sure that you have heard that. I think it was Richard Branson said he was going to head into space. Be one of the first billionaires into space, and then I guess with his newfound freedom and no longer responsibilities with Amazon, he oh my God, Jeff Bezos said he was going to beat him by like 2 weeks, and I'm sure that Elon Musk is sitting there going, that should be me. So yeah, these billionaires. I mean, I guess those are going to be the first, kind of. And actually, Ralph, I believe I was thinking of, and this is just a Wired article, but I'm more using it for the picture.
Oh, there you go.
Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine, of course. There you go. Yes, it's very reminiscent of that. Yeah.
It's just missing the giant arches, but yeah, clearly using rotational energy, has been around forever. I mean, the pictures are just wild. 2025 seems very ambitious, though.
That's what the article was stressing. This is a very, very ambitious goal, but we'll see. I mean, if it comes to pass, wow. Can you imagine a honeymoon or something? What a destination.
I want to say that Richard Branson with his Virgin Galactic was shooting for $100,000 for tickets to space, and I think that would get you a round trip around the moon. So it's not like to orbit and back. That's actually like a week in space, or at least a couple of days in space. Ralph, like $100,000, like if he's able to do that, like that's a lot, but that's not like completely impossible.
Exactly. Right. I mean, and who knows, over time in 20, 30 years from now, maybe it'll become routine. Who knows? Yeah,
definitely. Though, as always, you probably don't want to live there because, muscle degradation and bone degradation. But yeah, either way, that's just story number one. Story number two, though, lightest sound insulation, and I've dealt with a lot of sound insulation with building the studio here and kind of dealing with what we do. The technology for it hasn't really changed in like the last 40-50 years. It's all just foam padding and you call it a day. Sure. But just any kind of sound insulation or breakthroughs, I'm always interested. So what's story number two?
Yeah, you'll like this. So the headline here is lightest, and that means lightest in weight, sound insulation ever created will make aircraft engines 80% quieter. This comes from PC Magazine, story by Matthew Humphreys. I just love this. Researchers at the University of Bath in the United Kingdom seem to have achieved a way to reduce aircraft engine noise, they claim, by up to 80% while adding almost no extra weight. So critical for aviation applications, right? The research team developed a graphene oxide polyvinyl alcohol aerogel, which only weighs 4.6 pounds per cubic meter, and therefore makes it the lightest in weight sound insulation ever manufactured. The team managed to produce such an extremely low density by using a liquid combination of graphene oxide and a polymer, which are formed with whipped air bubbles and then freeze casted. Okay, on a very basic level, the technique can be compared to whipping egg whites to create meringues. Oh yeah, it's solid, but contains a lot of air. So there is no weight or efficiency penalty to achieve big improvements in noise reduction. I love that comparison to whipping egg whites, right? Mm-hmm. And adding the aerogel insulation to the engines on a commercial aircraft could reduce noise once again by up to 80% or 16 decibels. And according to the developers, it means that 105 decibel roar of a jet engine taking off would instead sound like a typical hair dryer. I would love to experience that and see if that's really the case, because if it is, oh my gosh, imagine how this would be so great for anybody working in an airport or surrounding an airport and so on and so forth. How wonderful.
Yeah, and don't forget that, so much of, really the design of these engines is also to reduce the sound for the passengers, that's, exactly, and I'm sure that if they don't have to take that into consideration as much, hey, it could definitely change, the shape of it and of course the weight of it, for fuel efficiency. I was able to find this image. This gentleman on the screen was the professor who kind of led the project, and that's actually what it looks like. For those who are simply listening, think of like a honeycomb. But this one's like packed. But this one's kind of. It looks like mud, but clearly, this stuff is like super, super lightweight. So I'm sure it would weigh like nothing.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, definitely. That's and of course, these new composite materials, they always seem so. I'm sure that if anyone else came up with this material and they'd be like, yeah, it's super light, but it doesn't really do much, and yet these guys are like, aircrafts would actually love this stuff. So I love new metamaterials. Yeah.
One last little nugget on this: if it makes the plane so dramatically more quiet for military, that means more stealthiness.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, it's whenever things just get lighter, quieter, better. That's always an improvement. So it's always worth taking note of. So story number 2, story number 3, and okay, so we've talked about self-healing concrete, self-healing gels, and self-healing bandages, wounds that kind of absorb into the body. This, though, it seems like I've seen this in Terminator, robotics healing themselves. So what is this?
Yes. It's so Terminator-esque. So the headline here is Smart Foam Material Gives Robotic Hand the Ability to Self-Repair. And friends, there's more. It's more than that. Source here is Reuters. A story by Travis Tiao and Li Ying Shan, and a great picture here, great link, and all that good stuff. But here's a story. National University of Singapore researchers have developed a smart foam material that allows robots to sense nearby objects. Let that sink in for a second. And repairs itself when damaged, just like human skin. Now, artificially innervated, I hope I'm saying that right, or foam, so artificially innervated foam, or AI foam, is a highly elastic polymer created by mixing fluoropolymer with a compound that lowers surface tension. So there's a lot of mechanical science and science going on here. This allows the spongy material to fuse easily into one piece when cut. To replicate the human sense of touch, now going on to that, it's one thing you can heal itself, but to replicate the human sense of touch, the researchers infused the material with microscopic metal particles, and added tiny electrodes underneath the surface of the foam. When pressure is applied, the metal particles draw closer with the polymer matrix, changing their electrical properties. These changes can be detected by the electrodes connected to a computer, which then tells the robot what to do in response. This feature enables the robotic hand to detect not only the amount, but also the direction of applied force, potentially making robots more intelligent and interactive. The new AI foam is the first of its kind to combine both self-healing properties and proximity and pressure sensing. Wow. After spending over 2 years developing it, the team hopes the material will be put into practical use within about 5 years. And you think about the prosthetics and the other, it's one thing to have robots, but how about helping people who maybe have lost a limb or a hand and so forth? It's just wild.
Yeah, and that would certainly make, maintenance, upkeep, repairing, but obviously, the first place that I kind of went to was, Ralph, we've talked about robotics that can do surgery and things like that. Imagine this stuff in a hospital where it can actually do more complicated stuff, because not every robot's going to look like a robot. Some of them are going to mimic, kind of human hands and be able to grab instruments and tools like that. So, they're attacking this from a lot of different angles. So very cool. We'll be able to get that firm handshake we want someday. So there you go. Story number 3, story number 4. if drones couldn't do it all, now they can, again, Terminator-esque, hunt us down even better. No, to save lives. To save lives, I promise.
Actually, this is a good example. You asked what kind of stories do I look for. One of the things I really love to find stories about technology helping first responders in disaster situations. And this fits that bill very nicely. So the headline here is New Drone Tracks Human Screams to Save Lives. Comes from Engadget, story by Igor Bonifasic. I hope I didn't butcher that name too badly. And it's just an intriguing additional thing about the use of drones, which we've talked about so much over the last many years. But here's the story. A team of researchers from Germany's Fraunhofer FKIE Institute has created a drone that can locate screaming humans. The goal is to make it easier for first responders to find survivors in situations such as, of course, most recently, the tragic Florida high-rise building collapse. What a tragedy. To create their drone, the researchers first recorded themselves screaming, tapping on surfaces, producing other sounds that someone in need of help might make, right? You know, tapping against a pipe or against concrete or whatever the case may be. They then use those recordings to train an artificial intelligence algorithm to filter out ambient sounds like the hum of the drone's rotors. That's a pretty interesting thing to be able to do. The team then equipped the drones with microphones like those used for smartphones. And the point of making that comment is that they combined some very sophisticated software, but with some pretty off-the-shelf technology like the microphones that you would use in a smartphone. So they're not exotic microphones is the point they're trying to make. The researchers conducted several successful open field tests recently in which their drone managed to estimate someone's location within a few seconds of picking up the sounds the person was making. Wow. I love this. I love anything that helps with search and rescue. You got that.
Definitely. And, you know, they have this little diagram here, which they really spell it out where, like you said, just your ordinary microphone array, some filtering to filter out, you know, the sound of the drone itself, detect beamform, it classifies, is this a human or is this some other kind of noise? And then, of course, it's going to use that beamform to locate and then, of course, you know, do what it will with the data. And Ralph,
cool.
Unlike, let's say, floating hotels in space, this one could probably be in the field. Like if they get a product, you know, kind of up and working, this could be in the field in a couple of months. Like it would not take long at all to do this.
Yeah, and I think last month, Ben, we talked about MIT's work to have coordinated search and rescue robots, or drones. Add this technology to that, and you've got just these exponential leap forwards in robotics and drones and so forth, helping us with search and rescue.
Yeah, that story from last month, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was about drones talking to each other. Like not even drones sending data back, but drones talking to each other, so they'd be able to search complicated, you know, buildings or, you know, entire buildings without an individual having to fly them into every room or things like that. So
that's right.
Yeah, this and of course that would make all the sense in the world that these technologies would be complementary. So very cool. I love drones and drone tracking. So story number 4, story number 5. Ralph, and I'll be honest, when I think satellites, I know that they've been around for 50 years, but I still think of them as highly advanced, complicated pieces of equipment that let us do so many things. Story number 5 might challenge that a little bit.
Yes, I couldn't resist this. And this is an example of the kind of, not to disparage the people involved with this, but kind of on the goofy, wacky side in the category of, okay, but why? Anyway, I digress. Headline, world's first wooden satellite aims to prove plywood can survive in space. Okay, that's something I was very worried about. This comes from CNET, story by Amanda Kuzer. And it's hilarious. I just love this. So it says an ambitious project will send a tiny wooden satellite into orbit later this year to see if it can stand up to the brutal conditions of space. The WISA, that's WISA, WoodSat, Wood, SAT for wooden satellite, is a 4-inch square. So it's tiny, 4-inch square birch plywood satellite designed by the Harika Science Center in Vantaa, Finland. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it's already survived a test run into the stratosphere. It's scheduled for a fall launch into space from a facility in New Zealand. And once it's in orbit, the team will monitor the little cube to see how its birch plywood construction stands up to cold, heat, radiation, and the vacuum of space. The plywood satellite's only non-wood parts are aluminum rails on the outside needed to release the satellite into space, and an extendable selfie stick that will hold a camera pointed back at the body. But it's okay. That's kind of, I don't quite know what the end game point of it is, because you're not going to be sending, I don't think. Let's imagine that hotel we were talking about, they're going to build in space. Are we going to start, sending up 4x8 sheets from Home Depot of plywood up into space? I'm not quite sure where the end game is in this, other than just a fun proof of concept. I don't know.
I guess if like the space station like blows a window, you could set up some plywood and just kind of temporarily fix it, and then exactly how long. And to your point, Ralph, like, I'm sure that the people who actually send up satellites, that are meant to last a long time, because this one, as the article points out, was just how long will it last? Like, clearly there's going to be some degradation. They're expecting it. How durable is plywood? Maybe for like very temporary satellites that you definitely don't need, Ralph. And hey, if you really wanted to swing it back around to kind of search and rescue, I mean, imagine if you could just fill this up with just the bare necessities, get a satellite up that is only going to be needed for like a week, and you could have constant communication, things like that. Like maybe very, very temporary satellites. This could be useful.
Well, yeah.
Maybe little things like that, but clearly, I've been to Houston, I've been to Cape Canaveral.
Me too.
If you told those scientists there that we could go to Home Depot and put something together for a lot cheaper, they would laugh you out of the room. So, Ralph. Yeah, proof of concept, and maybe there might be some applications, but it is fun. It is fun because, as I said before, when you think about space and satellites, it's a rich person's game and it's very complicated. But not so much. When you start talking about plywood and selfie sticks, I mean, I think that's more relatable to a lot of people.
Yeah,
so.
Well, I couldn't resist it.
Very, very cute, and definitely. And hey, something else I did not know, but I will now add to my memory banks is that. I guess there's a facility in New Zealand that you can launch stuff out of. Yes. I never really considered New Zealand like a big place to launch satellites from, but it makes sense.
Yeah, that caught my
water.
eye too. I thought, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, who knew? So there you go. Story number 5. Again, someone will find a use for these things. There you go. So story number 5. Story number 6. Hey, speaking about change and climate change and all that good stuff and green stories, which I know you're very fond of. Story number 6.
Yes. And again, we go back to the world of drones. So headline, I couldn't resist this. Drones are helping to clean up the world's plastic pollution. I picked this up from CNN, a story by Nell Lewis. And the image is really interesting that you're showing on the screen to our viewers and listeners. It really captures the essence of it. Let me get into it here. UK-based startup Ellipsis Earth has developed drones fitted with cameras designed to fly over and capture deposits of plastic waste, for example, on beaches, or the plastic waste that's floating out in the ocean, these horrible, gigantic Texas-sized islands of plastic junk out there. So images captured by the drones are then analyzed by their image recognition software, which is able to identify the type of plastic, its size, and in some cases, even the brand or origin of the trash. And that's in large measure kind of illustrated by the wonderful picture with all the little boxes that identify the objects. Really cool. In a demonstration, the Ellipsis Earth team showed how their software identified everything from a bottle cap toothbrush and fishing net to a food wrapper, various plastic bottles, and even a coil of rusted wire in a pile of waste on the beach. So it's not just only plastic. Actually, again, the rusted wire was identified. The startup has undertaken projects all over the world, from the United Kingdom coastline to the banks of the Ganges River in India. So another interesting, helpful tool for hopefully better managing and analyzing plastic waste in our world environment right now, which is a terrible, terrible problem. Oh, goodness.
Definitely. And it's one of those it's one of those things where it seems like such a huge issue and such a massive hurdle to kind of tackle that, Ralph, I think we really do need technology to kind of step up here. We need I believe you did one about like some automated kind of tidal powered cleanup drone things that were would kind of suck up plastic and things like that. Automatic, like this whole process, I feel, Ralph, definitely needs to be automated. And if anyone out there is kind of wondering why you get those captchas sometimes, especially from Google, I'd be like, click on everything that's a fire hydrant, click on everything that's a water bottle, click on everything that's, a truck or car or whatever. Those kinds of systems and those kinds of, pieces of data that are, that we just kind of send out there. This is one of the better use cases, Ralph, that I've seen here on the show of, computers being able to identify everyday objects and being able to, kind of pick it out and say, oh, there's this kind of plastic here, 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 and here. Very, very cool. And yeah, honestly, reading this article as you were kind of going through it, Ralph, I know that you did a good job here with, your synopsis, but it really goes to show just how big the problem was, because they said a lot of these beaches that need cleaned up are uninhabited islands. Like, you can't even blame the people there because there are no people there. There's no one there to clean it up. So huge issue, but technology, I feel, is definitely going to pull through for us. It's definitely going to be a good thing. So there we go. Story number 6, story number 7, and smart fabric. It's been on the horizon forever. I think it's in like some athletics programs. I think they're tracking athletes with it here and there. I'm sure, Ralph, actually that'd be a really fun guest to see if there was, anyone who trained for the Olympics and whoever provided them their clothes, if there were companies that made smart fabrics for, top tier athletes. I wonder if I get them to come on the show.
That would be cool, because there's fabrics that monitor your vitals, your temperature and all this kind of thing, and for the purpose of helping to monitor the athlete's activities and so on. So that would be a great guest to have. Somebody who's in that field would be fun.
Definitely.
I wonder if Nike, for example, has something like that going on.
Absolutely, for sure. Definitely have to do some research into that. But you did your own research with story number 7, and let's talk about that.
Yeah. Comes from Popular Mechanics. Headline: Smart fibers could turn Army uniforms into wearable computers. A story by Kyle Mizukami. And that's another one of the topics that I kind of watch for, and that's military applications for technology that give us a better ability to protect our soldiers and give them better reconnaissance and so forth. So here's the scoop. The U.S. Army, in collaboration with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has developed a technology for smart clothing fibers that could transform uniforms into wearable computers. The new electronic textiles could be used to power sensors, collect data on the wearer and his or her environment, and transmit the data back to headquarters. The fibers could also warn the wearer of dangers ahead, like chemical weapon attacks. So in other words, it's sort of predictive. It could say, warning, you're entering an area with some kind of chemical stuff going on, and mark the wearer's location for the rest of the team. The polymer fibers contain hundreds of tiny silicon microchips that, once electrically activated, can sustain a digital connection across tens of meters. And this part's interesting. The fiber is thin and flexible and can easily pass through a needle, be sewn into fabrics, and washed at least 10 times without breaking down. I think maybe that's, if you want to call it a weakness, only 10 washings before it breaks down is a limiter, but it depends on what this stuff costs.
I'm not the most familiar with military equipment, but I would imagine things like your helmet or your vest or something like that, you don't really put that through the washer too many times. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You're actually right, as opposed to your shirt and stuff. Because I'm going to think of it, when I was in the Army National Guard, we never washed our helmet covers or our vests or any of that. You make a good point. So maybe
things that are like more rigid but still cloth, you know?
Yeah, no, you make a good point. So again, this fabric can also act as a digital storage device. What? The fiber can power artificial intelligence applications, collecting data that an algorithm could later interpret to detect changes in both the wearer and the wearer's environment. So really interesting. And boy, you really did a light bulb in my head when you said use the fabric on things that aren't laundered frequently.
Right.
Not the soldier's socks, but the vest or the helmet or some other, even their weapon strap, that kind of stuff, or backpack, right? That kind of thing. There you go. Good thinking.
There's a lot of application, and really that's one of the main things is, when you put it in fabric is, pretty durable. And don't get me wrong, Ralph, I'm sure that everyone would love to kind of wash this thing as many times as they want, but some of the language used in this article, though, were, kind of head scratching, because they said things like a digital storage device. I'm kind of thinking, does that mean, like, in case of emergencies, the clothing could record, important metrics of, like, if they came under attack, and, could tell them something. And also that one where it could later interpret the signals that it picks up to, kind of determine what changes happened with the wearer. It sounds like if you wanted to do some kind of real-time thing, you'd still have to have some kind of computer connected to it 24/7. Is what it sounds like. Yeah.
I think it's more of a collection thing. That later gets analyzed. It'd be my guess based on what you were just saying.
Yeah, for sure. It's but still, and one of the best things that will move on to the next story was the idea that it can be threaded through the eye of a needle and sewn into clothing, which is, that's super tiny. That's and tiny, flexible, remarkable, and impressive. Definitely.
Yeah, extremely so.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, very, very cool. And I can't wait to see what kind of gadgets, or I guess I hope to never see the kind of gadgets that they come up with. That would be very amazing. Story number 8. Man, and there's so much conversation to be had around story number 8, because lab-grown meat, and Ralph, it so quickly turns from exotic meat to cannibalism to, the implications for the environment. Like, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of weird, but I'm so ready for lab-grown meat. Not for cannibalism, just to make that clear, but I'm so ready for lab-grown meat. And so story number 8, I think, is probably the most uplifting story you have in here so far. So...
Well, it's interesting, and we're going to have fun with this story because it raises a lot of questions that aren't in my show notes, but maybe we'll be able to chat about here. So here's the headline. The world's first lab-grown meat factory just opened up. So the point, ladies and gentlemen, is not that we haven't been able to using bioreactors, grow meat in laboratories and stuff. The point of this story is a large-scale factory now in existence. This comes from futurism.com, a wonderful website. Story by Victor Tangerman. And you can see a picture here, and there's a link and so forth. But this is in Israel, so this is interesting. Israeli biotech company Future Meat has opened what it claims to be the world's first industrial cultured meat facility. Wow. They say the facility is capable of producing 1,100 pounds of lab-grown meat products a day, or roughly the equivalent of 3,000 medium-sized hamburgers. Cultured beef, for example, is created by painlessly harvesting muscle cells from a living cow. And I'll digress for a moment. They're going to go after the most really super high-bred cows. What is it, Kobe? Or what's the word for those? Yeah, Kobe. That kind of thing. Scientists then feed and nurture the cells so they multiply to create muscle tissue. That's what a bioreactor does, which is the main component of the meat we eat. All right. The company claims cultured meat, and this is where it's got the environmental benefits. They claim the cultured meat generates 80% less greenhouse emissions uses 99% less land and consumes 96% less water than traditional meat production, which would mean, of course, ranches and farms and that sort of thing, right? In addition to beef, this is cool, the factory can produce cell-based chicken, pork, and lamb products. And the company also claims the process is about 20 times faster than raising animals and then slaughtering them. So here's the thing that's this is for us as a culture. You've got some vegetarian issues going on over here, but you also have our farm community, and I'm sympathetic. Oregon is a very agricultural state in large measure, as are, of course, Washington and our neighbors in Idaho and so on, where animal production is, especially for the ranchers in the eastern part of the state, it's a critical life thing for them. So I'm kind of torn down the middle. On one hand, I think this is great, how cool this is for the environment. On the other hand, my heart breaks to think about all the ranchers and people that could possibly lose their jobs. But, I don't know, maybe they can transition to other kinds of agriculture that would still sustain them and so forth. But I digress. But here's the thing I wanted to chat with you about, Ben.
Yes, sir.
My wife and I became vegetarians many years ago when our little daughter, when she was maybe, how old was she? Maybe 5 or something. We're sitting at the dinner table and we're eating, I think it was, I don't know whether they were eating beef or maybe it was a lamb chop or something like that. And she looked at us and she said, well, Mom and Dad, where does this come from? And I think we said, well, it's from a cow. And she just burst into tears.
She loves cows.
Literally. She just burst. She's just a little sweetheart. She just had a big heart for animals. Just sobbing. I mean, not just crying, sobbing. And that was like, time out. No more meat for us. And it was tough for me because I love the flavor of a steak. Don't get me wrong. And all the chicken, ribs. Right. Oh, yeah. But. And fortunately, in my case, my doctors have said, thank God for your daughter, because, it was definitely gave you a leg up on your health situation over these years. But here's the question. See what you think of this. So you take vegetarians like our family that, for whatever reason, became vegetarians. And many vegetarians are there because they don't like the idea of animals being killed. Okay, right. That's their thing. So now, if you harmlessly extract muscle tissue cells from an animal and use a factory to reproduce meat, now there won't be any bone, won't be probably any gristle or things that do add flavor, but would you then be willing to eat that meat because it's not involving the killing of any animals? That's going to put a lot of vegetarians in a crossroads of decision, right? For me, I'd say sure, because the main concern was the hurting or the execution of animals. So I don't know. I mean, or is it still not as healthy as being a plant-based person? I don't know.
So, and clearly, I mean, humans evolved to be omnivores. They were opportunistic. What they could when they could. From my understanding, up until it's like recent times, meat wasn't really plentiful. It was, our diet was mostly foraging and whatever we could kind of gather. Yep. And then if we came across something we could kill, hey, great, meat for the night. And like you said, with your health concerns, and by the way, that was a very cute story with your daughter, and I'm again glad that it happened, because hey, you're here maybe because of it.
I'm still here.
But yeah, there's a lot of health benefits to cut certain kind of meat out, and so on and so forth. Ralph, I always want to bring this up with this particular lab grown meat, is because you can grow meat in Ralph, we've been doing that since like the 80s with things like skin grafts and so many other things where you can make cells reproduce in petri dishes. That happens all the time. But now you're doing muscles, and I pulled up this image here. This is just a random picture from Science Learning Hub. Here's the big issue, Ralph, and for anyone out there who's just listening to my voice, growing a muscle cell is one thing. You could have a giant vat of muscle cells and it's whatever. Yeah. But it's that act of using and tearing the muscle, letting it heal over and over again, that everyone, it happens to everyone. That's how you build muscle. That's how you walk. It's how your muscles are constantly tearing and stressing and healing and repairing. And Ralph, that texture of a steak is essentially that cow and it walking and whatever. When you have it in a vat, you have a bunch of cells next to each other, but they don't form structures like this. Good point. It may be, on a cellular level identical, but in a structure level, you're never, that's the hard part. Good point. How do you get something to chew, taste, have the texture? Yeah, yes. Exactly. How do you get that similar feeling? And that's I feel like what point. They're. Yeah, and that's why, Ralph, a lot of the artificial meats that people are seeing nowadays are hamburger or chicken breasts or things that are pretty homogenous or can be ground up, or hot dog, or sausages is another kind of big kind of faux meat thing. It's things that don't really have a structure, like a piece of steak. Like if anyone out there is wondering, why don't they have artificial ribs? They have the McRib. Why don't they have artificial? And that was a joke, by the way. I know it's not actually artificial meat, but anyways, that's why they don't have a steak. That's why you don't have ribs. That's why you don't have things that have a defined structure. Instead, you have, again, ground beef and chicken breast. It's things that can be formed into other things that look like it. Ralph, that's one whole conversation, and they're working on it. That's like the next big hurdle, is how to figure out how to get these things to have a similar texture to what people are used to. And by then, I don't know, like, honestly, Ralph, if anyone came to me and said it tastes better because it suffered, they are banned from eating meat altogether. I don't really care about their opinion. If you can grow meat without anything suffering, that sounds like a no-brainer. That's just an instant, perfect solution to the problem.
And as you were speaking, I was thinking now you could stay pure vegetarian if that's your thing, great. Or if you're a vegetarian who didn't want to eat something that was slaughtered, but now you have this option, and then you've got the traditional meat thing. It doesn't necessarily have to go away. It might shrink in size, but now you've got three kind of channels, maybe like an ethical omnivore,
something like that.
There you go. Yeah. And I also thought of something you were talking about. We evolved as a species being omnivores, and we were also foragers, of course, but we were also scavengers. And the reason I bring that up is many, many years ago, oh my gosh, I had terrible acid reflux, and I finally couldn't swallow. So I went to the doctor. The doctor said, "Stupid idiot, why didn't you tell me about this long ago? You've been having terrible acid indigestion." And all. So they did the endoscopy, where they send down the camera. They did 20 tissue samples of my esophageal tube.
But that felt good.
And they thought I was a dead man. The doctors in charge said, we all looked at each other and said, uh-oh, this boy's got cancer big time. Turns out every single one of those samples was benign. Thank God. Where am I going with this? I said to the doctor, I said, why in the heck do we have this acid in our stomachs? What's the point if it's so harmful to us? The doctor said, guess what? One of the prevailing theories is our ancient ancestors had the acid to help digest spoiled meat they found, roadkill. So they would eat this stuff out of desperation. And this would, kill the bacteria and the bad stuff, so you could still survive and eat this roadkill, we'll call it. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
Sorry, I digress.
That and it's very true to break down and kill any kind of super harmful bacteria and bugs and things like that. Not so much roadkill, unless you're thinking like Flintstones and those cars and they were hitting dinosaurs back then. But no, I just obviously meat is meat, and when you're desperate for calories, hey, anything works. Very true. But now one last little topic, and then we'll move on to our next story. But I want to pose this to you, Ralph, because right now you can take any kind of meat, and really you don't have to kill an animal. Really, you don't even have to harm it. Like, you can just stick it with a very tiny needle and get cells to start this whole process as you will. It's not like you have to take a cow, put it in a blender, and dump the blended up cow into the reactor. No, you just take a little needle and you're good to go. But Ralph, what happens if you wanted to make reactors full of gazelle meat? What if you wanted to make it full of lion meat? What if you wanted to make it full of whale meat? It doesn't have to be just cow and pork like we're used to.
That's true.
It can be
That's
any
true.
meat, including human cells are definitely
that's
capable.
Soylent Green, isn't it?
Well, no, that's just blending up people for the sake of eating people.
Well, that's true. You're right.
That's why I wanted to post to you. Do you think we're going to stick with just the traditional, what is conventionally easy to grow in our current agriculture system? Do you think
you're right?
Do you think we're going to start making
you're right.
other animal meat?
Ben, I think you're 100% right. Down the road, when it becomes more viable on a large scale production point of view, you might go to Costco someday and see zebra. Mm-hmm. Or gazelle, as you said, or alligator. Well, alligator you can get in the South pretty easy, but you get the point.
Yeah, and then one last thing was that, Ralph, because people say that kangaroo meat's very good for you, like iron rich and stuff like that. They say that like gazelle meat's very very lean and not full fat. Ralph, with this you can also grow cell cultures together, and you can actually have something like, let's say, pork and, we have beefalo right now, but you can have like pork and chicken grown together, and it's one homogeneous meat that you can buy off the shelf. What if you start mixing your meat and decide that, Ralph, the best meat in the world is actually 20% cow, 10% pork, 20% duck, 30% gazelle, 10% kangaroo, and that is the perfect cut of meat that you could possibly get. That's also in our future.
Yes, that's fun to speculate on.
There's so much good that can come from it, and this part right here is what kind of makes it all possible. 80% less greenhouse gases, 99% less land, 96% less water, and of course that means less pollution altogether. That ties back in with kind of our troubles that we have all over the world. This helps feed. Ralph, this helps feed 2 billion people in India. This helps feed 1.5 billion people in China. This helps feed the world. This is what we need. This is why you come on the show. I love it.
And it would create a lot of jobs in these new emerging bioreactor factories.
You were talking about Oregon and its whole agriculture, kind of based economy. Like, who says they can't do this? Oregon, I think, is so well poised, and not to toot their horn, but agriculture right next to California and Washington with all the technology, it seems like a natural, kind of hand in hand with high tech and agriculture together. Well,
and Lord knows we've got high tech right here in Oregon. A stone's throw from my house is Intel. Largest Intel population of buildings and people in the world is here in Oregon, of all places. Go figure.
Yeah. Honestly, there's so many opportunities in the future, and it's if anyone's a vegetarian because they're afraid that resources and land utilization, all that kind of thing, if they think that they're vegetarian because they're using too many resources, there's an answer. We just have to hopefully get there before we all bake. Now. Yeah. So story number 8, and Ralph, that was a lot of fun. Story number 8, story number 9. Let's go and do that. And after 9, we're going to start cherry picking, and but we'll include all of them in the show notes.
Great. Okay, so story number 9, a new space telescope could spot potentially hazardous asteroids heading for Earth. Now, we've had this before, as the story will point out. It comes from CNN, a story by Ashley Strickland. And this is interesting. NASA's new, it's not out there yet, new infrared space telescope with the mission to spot potentially hazardous asteroids and comets heading for Earth is one step closer to reality. The Near Earth Orbit Surveyor Space Telescope, or NEO Surveyor, has been approved by NASA to move forward to the design phase. The 20-foot-long infrared telescope would bolster planetary defense by helping astronomers find asteroids and comets that come within 30 million miles of Earth's orbit. Now, note, an infrared telescope is a telescope that uses infrared light to detect celestial bodies. Infrared light is electromagnetic radiation with wavelengths longer than those of visible light. Now, this NEO Surveyor will have the capability to rapidly accelerate the rate at which NASA is able to discover asteroids and comets that could pose a hazard to Earth. Now, we've had telescopes in orbit that can do this since, I think, 2010, I think is approximately the time frame. But what they're saying about this one can see much smaller bodies that far away that could potentially be a problem as well. So it's a step forward, not the first time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like, we're at the stage where we're starting to detect these things, Ralph, but we're still at the stage where if we see one coming, I mean, short of like a movie monumental effort, we just kind of know the end date. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we really have the technology to stop it. Although I guess we just have to shove it just a little bit. That's much smarter people's problems than my own. So that was story number 9.
Great, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So story number 9. Story number 10, I'm actually very interested in because, let's see, I think this one was very cool. But one story that I'm surprised that you didn't have in your in your show notes was the one in China that broke a bunch of records. I think that was actually in the last month. But yeah, we can at least talk about number 10.
Well, yeah, this one's interesting. This comes from Popular Mechanics, story about Caroline Delbert. Headline: New reactor may have finally solved nuclear fusion's biggest problem, which of course is heat. And we've got great link and some video and so forth. So here we go. Nuclear fusion is the process that happens in the sun, for example, where light elements, fuse together to release energy and create larger elements. Nuclear fusion could bring us abundant, low-carbon energy. I think we all know this. But to make nuclear fusion power plants a reality, here's the problem. A way must be found to deal with the white-hot plasma within a nuclear fusion reactor that can reach 100 million degrees Fahrenheit or more. That heat results in, they say, wear and tear, but I mean terrible wear and tear on a reactor's components. This is a limiter in terms of practical deployment and really making this work. Now, scientists at the United Kingdom's Culham Centre for Fusion Energy in England might have just found the key to unlocking a cooler future for nuclear fusion. The research team recently enhanced an existing mega-amp spherical tokamak reactor with a new heat exhaust system they call Super X diverter. This is very geeky stuff, guys. The new Super X diverter, they claim, greatly reduces heat impact on all of the spherical tokamak's parts. According to the lead scientist for the project, and what I'm about to say is just melts my mind, no pun intended, the new Super X exhaust system for nuclear fusion reactors reduces the heat handled by the exhaust system from a blowtorch level down to more like you'd find in a car engine. Holy smokes, if that's true, folks, this is a big, big potential breakthrough that could make this a reality for us worldwide.
Definitely. And you know,
if it's true.
It certainly, if it's true, and obviously there's a lot of work. I was looking at one of the stories that I was thinking of. It was actually June 7th, 2021. So this would have been like 2 or 3 weeks before you started collecting your stories, to be on the show.
Right.
Did you actually catch this, or am I breaking this to you?
No, I've heard of it around the periphery, so fill me in. Oh yeah, there we go. Yes, I saw that headline. Yep. And so just a quick little blurb, and then we'll move on to one more story. It's China's artificial sun reached 120 million degrees Celsius for 101 seconds. So like you said, all that heat wears and tears the stuff, but hey, being able to manage the heat is the key to making these things run, indefinitely. And that's where we need to get, is instead of 100 seconds or 10 seconds, we need these things to run continuously. Right.
So
that's right. So again, that's why this story we just talked about from the folks in the UK, if it works, if it really does do what they feel it can do, that's the key, as the headline talks about, the key to making this a reality. And oh my gosh, what a world it would be if we could have this work.
Definitely. Story number 11, I definitely love, but I think one that might fit our time constraints. We're here with about 2 minutes. Story 13, I think, would actually, because people should be very familiar with Cybertrucks from Tesla. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So the headline, Tesla Cybertruck retractable solar bed cover revealed in a patent they just filed. Comes from electric.com, story by Fred Lambert. Great image, great link, and so forth. But after the launch of the Cybertruck, CEO Elon Musk surprised many when he said that Tesla's new electric pickup truck will have a solar roof option. It's actually a solar bed cover that will add 15 miles of range per day. In 2017, Musk said that he pushed his Tesla engineers to look into integrating solar cells on Model 3, but they concluded that it wasn't worth it at the time. Solar cell efficiency has since improved, and Tesla developed its own expertise in embedding solar cells through the development of solar roof tiles, which is a whole other fun topic. The design of the truck's solar bed cover is remarkable, as it can be retracted and rolled into a cylinder form and stored within the truck's body. You really need to see the article, see the diagrams and so forth to get what they're talking about. It's like not really a Venetian blind, but more like a blind you'd have on your patio that you can roll up with a string. When deployed, the solar panel bed covering is strong enough for someone to stand on. Wow. I mean, there's so many things about this that are kind of fun from an electromechanical point of view, too. Is again, I urge you to go to the article, look at the diagrams, and you can see how this cover for the bed sneaks in and rolls up inside the body of the truck and then can be deployed back out. And once again, strong enough for someone to stand on. Imagine that.
Yep, and again, a lot of that credit goes to some of the it looks all kind of like a bike chain, but obviously it would kind of roll out. And it's again, a lot of credit to their kind of sister projects where they said like the roof tile, which obviously if you need a roof tile, it needs to be durable, it needs to be very resistant, but hey, it needs to be efficient. So it's the folks over at Tesla. I don't know who's pushing them, but clearly they're using every tool available to make sure that their stuff, works as well as it can. So very cool idea. I had not heard about that. And Ralph, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing all of this with us. So everyone, again, if you missed any part of this, we'll have the show notes up, hopefully in just a couple of minutes, over at computeramerica.com. And in the meantime, you can head on over to Ralph Bond Wicks, if you just want to punch it in there, or computeramerica.com. And you can, of course, get a link to it there. So Ralph, until next time, hey, stay safe. Looking forward to next month, and everyone have a good one. We'll catch you next week. Bye everyone.